what is the state of leadership in Africa. And permit me to run you across the continent of Africa, and you will see a continent that is not at ease. The continent is not at ease because the continent is suffering from a deficit of leadership. Look at Africa today. Tell me whether we are at ease in Niger. Tell me whether Mali is settled. Tell me whether there is quiet and calm in Chad. Tell me whether Guinea-Bissau is doing well. Tell me whether the Cameroons are stable. Tell me whether Central African Republic is good. Tell me whether Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Northern Mozambique, and all these countries where there is peace and quiet, whether the sons and daughters of this country, tell me whether even this great Nigeria is at ease. Tell me. The answer is, she is not. Why is it that while on average 60 years after we regained independence, the 55 countries that constitute the continent of Africa, why is it that we cannot feed ourselves? Why is it that we have no faith in our institutions, we have no faith in our hospitals? Why is it that we have no faith in our education systems? Why is it that we have no faith in our abilities? Why is it? Where has the leadership been? Why is it that so many years, while politics becomes the toy that lulls us into a false sense of security, our economies are controlled by people from other civilizations? Why is it? These are uncomfortable questions which we must pose and confront and answer if the mother continent is to realize our potential. Why is it that the mother continent is ever so negatively attractive to other civilizations? You know, as I talk about leadership, and as I think about leadership, and I think about what leaders are enjoined to do, I think about this mother continent. And many times, I see how our men and women in positions of leadership are being treated by other civilizations. And I said, oh God, where are our leaders? When the world congregates under the G7, there are no African leaders there. The best they can do is to invite one or two, and beyond the photo opportunity, they are told to go away, and go away they do. When there is a meeting of the G20, it is the same thing. There is no African leader there. And when at the United Nations they have voted all our countries, France, the United States, China, Russia, can come and neutralize all our votes. And I say, where are the leaders in Africa? And as you observe African leadership today, they are summoned by different leaders in the world. If the Japanese do not summon them to Tokyo under UNCTAD, the Indians are summoning them to New Delhi. And if the Indians are not summoning them, the Turks are summoning them. And if the Turks are not summoning them, the Chinese are summoning them. In the next 2 weeks, they will have been summoned to the United States of America. Summoned, I use. Africans who are watching this scenario ask, where are our leaders? Which begs the question, who is a leader? Is leadership the occupation of office? Is leadership the occupation of the office of the president? Is it the occupation of the office of a senator or a member of parliament? Or the occupation of these high-sounding positions which gives us honorifics? Is that what leadership is? From where I sit, that is pseudo-leadership. From where I sit, leadership is about service. Leadership is about honor and privilege to serve. That is why I still understand the men of old, the men of wisdom who said, he who is greatest amongst you must be your servant. This is what Africa is asking for. And Africa has been asking this question since she regained her independence. You know, when one is talking about leadership in Africa, one must go into history and ask ourselves, what was leadership before we were rudely disrupted? We had our traditional rulers. How did they govern? For whose benefit did they govern? They are still there, the traditional rulers. How do they fit in the new dispensation? When we regained independence and adopted all these structures from the erstwhile colonizer, what did we expect to deliver? That great American Pan-Africanist John Hendricks Clark says that when Africans regained their independence, not a single one of them re-examined the style of leadership. All of them continued with a mimicry of the leadership that they inherited from the colonizer. And he then delivers this verdict: not a single African country will ever succeed by mimicry. And I want to submit to you that whether one agrees or disagrees with John Hendrik Clark, one must look at Africa in order to ask ourselves, when you look at Africa and leadership, you must go back to history. And you ask yourself what the leadership is. And we have looked at Africa that is not at ease. But yet there is a sense in which Africa has had and continues to have men and women of renown. How many of you in this assembly will not remember Marcus Garvey and say that he was a leader? How many of you here will not remember Julius Nyerere and not say that he was a leader? How many of you will remember Kaunda, Amilcar Cabral, Samora, Moises Machel, Agostino Neto, Namdi Azikiwe, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and many others, and remember that they were leaders who did not want to occupy political space because of material aggrandizement. They denied themselves. I so very fondly remember that when Kenneth David Kaunda left office, it was said of him that the only amount of money he had in his account was the equivalent of $5,000. That is what your current politician eats for breakfast. I can remember when Julius Kambarage Nyerere left office after 24 years, the only amount of money that he had in his account was the equivalent of 8,000 United States dollars. That is what your current politician uses for a single visit to a gymnasium. They were leaders who were selfless. They understood that it was an honor and privilege. They sacrificed their lives. They saw their positions of leadership as that of leading their brethren. They did not think that they were superior to the people they led. They thought it was a privilege and that they had the honor and that because they had that honor, then they had to serve their leaders with distinction, with consistency. They were prepared to be questioned. They did not believe that they had the monopoly of knowledge and wisdom. They were leaders because they were servants. You know, I can still remember Julius Kambarage Nyerere speaking on the 6th day of March, 1997 in Accra, Ghana, on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the independence of Ghana, under the subject, "Without unity, Africa has no future." Mwalimu recounts the history of Africa. He says, when we rose up against the colonialists, our agenda was cut out for us. We, the Africans, had been humiliated in our own lands. Our people had been denied the opportunity to realize their potential. Our mandate was one, to expel the colonizer. We did our bit. We made our mistakes. But who said we were infallible? This struggle is an intergenerational struggle. The next generation after us had the duty to pick up the baton and to run the next leg. The question is, did that generation pick up the baton? Have they run the leg well? The answer, not as well as they should have. Because we must never make the mistake of assuming that African leaders have done nothing. No, that would be too harsh. I think attempts have been made, whether in Nigeria or in different parts of Africa, to liberate ourselves from the chains and sorrows of the colonial project. But remember, as Kwame once said, the colonialist never left. He is alive and well. He still wears different masks. And those masks may appear to camouflage him, but they are here. Have you ever wondered why, when the British left their colonies, they created something that they called the Commonwealth of Nations, to which Nigeria belongs? In that Commonwealth of Nations, the head is the British monarch. When the Queen dies, the King becomes its head. It is headquartered in London. It is the Commonwealth of Independent and Free Nations. It is not. It is a post-colonial, neo-colonial institution which continues to massage the ego of the erstwhile colonizer as we celebrate. Through such institutions, they continue to control and to manipulate us. And many of us, particularly those of us who have had the advantage of foreign education, we never want to talk ill of bodies such as the Commonwealth. I do. And it's not only the British who did it. The French did it under Francophonie. In order to control their former colonies and to make sure that they remain within their sphere of influence, they created a body which is alive and well. In the former French colonies, it's even worse. They even print their currency. The Portuguese did it. So, in as much as African leaders have been trying to ensure that we change the circumstances of our people, there have been external attempts at torpedoing those efforts. And Africa and African leadership must be seen in those contexts. There are those in many African countries who have allowed themselves to be acolytes of the neo-colonizers and to the detriment of the continent of Africa. So when we interrogate leadership, we must ask ourselves, how free are our leaders? How free are our politicians from external influence? But is that an excuse? No, it cannot be an excuse. Leaders in a multi-ethnic environment must also be different. As Samora Moises Machel said, if the post-colonial African country is to succeed, the tribe must die. And the tribe must die because if the tribe does not die, then the new nation will never thrive. And I did not understand Samora Moises Machel to say that you should stop being a Yoruba. No. I did not understand him to say that you should stop being a thief or to stop being an Igbo or Hausa or a Fulani. No. Those are cultural mosaics which, when put together, make our nations beautiful and strong. But what do we do in most of Africa? We use those cultural differences to divide the people. We use those cultural differences to reinforce centrifugal forces and therefore threaten the very nation which we want to serve. I am telling all of us who are present here, and many of you who are present in this assembly who are honored and respected and claim to be leaders, that you have a duty to ensure that you are in front in order to serve and not to be served. Who is a leader? Is he a leader who allows meta-ignorance to reign supreme amongst the people he or she is leading? Is it the duty of a leader to ensure that he leads men and women who are enlightened? Men and women who can question what he or she is doing? I'm suggesting to us that true and sustainable leadership also requires that you have a followership that is enlightened, a followership that calls you to account, a followership that is going to make demands of you, a followership that when you say that you are going to improve the quality of their food, they do not believe that agriculture stops on that day, but they believe that agriculture must be intensified and the technology must be used. A followership which knows that when you say you are going to deliver heaven on earth, they know that that is merely an advertisement that you are incapable of delivering heaven on earth. A followership that knows that when you are promising to do things within 100 days, which ordinarily can only be done in 5 years, they know that you are a liar. A followership that is capable of discerning that when you speak things, there are many variables, and it is the duty of a leadership to ensure that such a leadership is indeed created. What do African leaders do? African leaders in many African countries have now assigned the question of education, educating their followers to NGOs and CBOs, which are financed by the Americans, which are financed by the Europeans, which are financed by other civilizations. How do you think, how do you imagine that the people of Denmark would have the interest of Nigeria at their heart? How are you satisfied that all those civic education activities that are being undertaken in Borno, or in Maiduguri, or in Abeokuta, financed by USAID, are meant to be for the benefit of Nigeria? Because the last time I checked, the English used to say, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So today, when you look at most of Africa, we have a followership that is tuned from outside. It is not a followership that is tuned from inside. And you wonder why they behave the way they do. They behave the way they do because they are being tuned by other civilizations. I'm suggesting to you that Africa will never realize our potential as long as the critical mass of our people are immersed in sorrow and want. I am suggesting to you that Africa is not going to grow as long as you who are in positions of leadership have perfected the art of appealing to the stomachs rather than the minds of the men and women that you lead. I'm suggesting to you that Africa is not going to realize our potential as long as we continue to conduct the politics of money and money bags, not the politics of ideas. I'm suggesting to you that Africa is never going to realize our potential as long as we are dividing our people along ethnic lines. I'm suggesting to you that as long as you who are in positions of honor and privilege are in the business of dividing our people on the basis of religion, Africa is not going to realize our potential. I look forward to the day when those of you who are in positions of leadership will be able to tell our people, wherever they are in Nigeria or Africa, that it is not for us to fight for God. If I have a God for whom I have to fight for, that is not a God. The God that I worship fights for me. And if we accept that that is the nature of God, that is omnipresent, omniscient, and He knows all, then we are going to unite our people. In other words, I'm saying that if we are going to have a followership that is going to change the continent of Africa, we have got to exorcise the ghost of ethnicity. We have got to exorcise the ghost of ignorance. We have got to exorcise the ghost of poverty. We have got to exorcise the ghost of narrow-mindedness.